What's happening, y'all? I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You're tuned into LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective. So let's get right to it. Today is one of our favorite shows, and it's why we love HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. You know, both of us, ClaVille, myself, I'm a graduate of Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, the first HBCU, founded in 1854, proud Lincoln Lion and ClaVille from Southern University.
Southern University, Jaguars. Of course, we know that there's no greater band, no greater college experience than on the yard at Southern, and also a double graduate, Southern University Law Center. Of course, I've got my moot court board shirt on. Again, the greatest experience I've had at both institutions. And right behind me, I have the Blazing Hot 91 from Norfolk State University.
That's right. You work at Norfolk State. That's right.
I'm currently a professor. So this is somewhere where Jaguars and Spartans meet. And we've got a radio show. I've been blessed to have one here on the station called State of the Water. It deals with public policy, law, and politics. Everything that I love to do, I've been able to do it here at our HBCUs.
And I will be remiss. I got to give love to Hampton University on the other side of the water, where I had my radio show, the Will LaVeist Show, on Smooth 88.1 WHOV, where jazz lives. I've had that show for several years at Hampton University. Also taught there in the journalism department. So again, it's just that pride in having HBCUs. Now, Eric, when we were talking about this and talking about doing this show, you actually found somebody posted on the internet 10 reasons why, 10 reasons to attend HBCU. Talk a little bit about that. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah, so there's a group called HBCU Alumni United. Over 84,000 HBCU alumni are on this Facebook page. Of course, when I talk about Facebook itself, of course, we're talking about a generation that still uses Facebook. Those of us with kids, we keep up with each other, kids. We don't have time for Snapchat. We don't have time for, these other social media pieces because we got jobs. We work. We like to get our rest, when it actually turns dark. We can't do it like we used to do growing up.
No, speak for yourself. Speak for yourself, man. I can still do it like I used to do. Still do it like I used to do when I went. Well, not quite. When I was on the yard, not quite.
Well, listen, I am speaking for me. I can't do it. Trust me. But but what this list talks about, Will and I, part of our show, and this is a fun show for us because it's a show that's near and dear to our hearts. We got our education, our foundation HBCUs. We both taught HBCUs. Matter of fact, Will and I both met at Hampton University, where I served as a professor, and also my wife served as a professor there, an administrator. And we had phenomenal opportunities here at all of our HBCUs, whether it be at Lincoln, at Southern University, and Southern University Law Center, whether it be at Hampton, whether it be at Norfolk State University. We've had phenomenal opportunities to really explore not just things that we love,
right,
but from perspective.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. And it's something, man, we both gone on and gotten, additional degrees. But when people ask me where I graduated from, I always revert back to the Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. So I went to the University of Arizona. I love University of Arizona. Go Wildcats, Arizona. And got my journalism master's. And then I got my doctorate at Old Dominion University down the block. Go Monarchs, So, but I love all these institutions. But when somebody asks me, where did you graduate from? I just always revert back to Lincoln. And the interesting thing about me is that you hear me mention all those schools. All of them got cat mascots. So I don't know what's up with that, but it is what it is. It's something about that roar. Something about that.
Look, it is. You mentioned other universities. I got my graduate degree from Louisiana State University, LSU. I've served. I've been able to participate as a faculty scholar at NYU University up in New York City during the summer once. And again, we've had an opportunity to go other places, experience other opportunities, right, education. But we all refer back to our HBCU experience,
right,
as we refer to every place being the yard. So let's count it down.
Let's hit that countdown. Definitely. Number 10.
Yeah, number 10, you'll be in good company. Now, we when we talk about HBCUs, we know that they're historically black. We know that all of them were created out of
Mhm.
opportunity for African Americans, and from that we created culture. But when people talk about blacks being the same, or they talk about the black church, or they talk about the black school or the black community, well, everybody that's in the black community is different.
Right.
Everybody that's in the church is different. As a matter of fact, there are different types of churches. So when you'll be in good company, that means you're going to be not only with African Americans and get a wealth of experience and interaction with black people, not just from the U.S. itself, but also outside of the United States from
Right.
other countries, and also from other non-black countries. But also, you're going to get experience from people who are black like you, but have different experiences.
Yeah,
And I,
I think you're exactly right about that. I mean, my experience, like a lot of students, I actually went to another institution before I ended up at Lincoln University. I was recruited to play basketball up in an institution in Massachusetts, and I went coming out as a kid, coming out of Brooklyn, New York, Brownsville section of Brooklyn, New York. I just wanted to leave and go and explore and get out the hood. Just be honest, and
that's right.
basketball, along with having decent grades, was a pathway for me to do that. But when I got on that campus, it was a majority white, small institution, a Catholic institution. I was raised, a Methodist. There was so many different differences, but the biggest difference was that there was like maybe 15 black students on campus, and 11 of us was on the basketball team, and it was only two black women on the campus. And so, when I got there, I was like, the ball part of it was okay, but it was like, yo, this other whole experience that makes you a whole person, this is not for me. But, I stuck it out. I stuck out the season and decided along the way that I was going to go to a black college. And somebody introduced me to Lincoln. I heard of Lincoln along the way. And when I got there and I got on the campus, my feeling of being home from that previous experience was just like night and day. So I think they're right when you talk about being in good company and being around your people and being in your culture, being in your lane, so to speak. Lincoln
Mhm.
absolutely was that, and since I've had lifelong friends from that experience being on that campus.
That's another reason to attend HBCU and why we love it. But we're going to get to that in a moment. But you're exactly right. We had back at Southern, we had groups from California called the Cali Crew. Of course, you had the Chicago crew
Right,
that with the Chicago house music. You had the New Orleans crew. You had the Florida crew. You had where we're from, Shreveport. We had the Port City crew. I mean, everybody had their crews, and we were all different,
right,
right? And one thing that I noticed as well is that you'll have cats coming from, and of course I'm dating myself, I use the word cat, but you got cats coming from, Washington State, Seattle, from the West Coast, from the Midwest, right? Saying, man, saying, I've never seen so many, beautiful, educated black people in one place.
right,
And, they end up falling in love because they're like, hey, we grew up in quote unquote diverse societies, but really it was majority white societies. Or if you're from a different area, you have, of course, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, and so forth, where you weren't the majority, or your reasons or your reason for being or your causes weren't at the forefront. But by being an HBCU, you're there because black not only do black lives matter, black intellect matters,
right.
professional matters, black hair matters, black athletes matter, everything matters, right? At HBCU, and the leaders of student government, black, the quarterback, black, the league had an issue with black quarterbacks. Well, we never had an issue from.
Right.
In fact, Doug Williams, as black quarterbacks came from HBCUs, Grambling State University, Southern University, all universities, they put out athletes, and that's where the league came to get top athletes. But I'm getting ahead of myself because you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
tell.
because you actually touched on some of number 5, which is diversity. But go to number 9, scholarships and grants.
Yeah, number 9.
It's a big one for you. This is a big one for you, boy. You got kids getting ready to enter college. It's a big one for you. Talk about it.
Hey, brother, look, I'm on it like an eagle. My son, he's here, and my son, he applied to about 10 plus universities, and we narrowed it down. And one thing that my wife and I decided a long time ago is, I'm a compulsive planner. I take copious notes.
Right.
So after my wife was pregnant, I started planning their lives out to 25, right? Things that we would expose them to. And part of that was savings, right? So everybody starts a college saving plan. Well, brother, let me tell you, $25 a month don't go a long way, even with compound
No, not in
interest.
this economy at all. I don't think it went a long way in the 80s or the 70s, but it's certainly not going a long way now.
Absolutely not. And the fortunate thing about it is that even my wife and I, we were fortunate enough to work together, both at Southern University
Right.
and University. So we've always been together working on campus for really the majority of our lives together. So I started to see the cost of education go up, brother. And I told my wife, I said, look, we can continue saving as we're saving, but we now have to push our kids to start looking for scholarships. And we are fortunate enough to teach a young lady who grew up in Louisiana, a poor town. She was a very good student, great parents, father and mother, but they just didn't have the money to send her to college, right? So they told her, baby, if you want to go to college, you got to find a way to pay for it yourself. We'll help you as much as we can.
Right.
So what we started doing in ninth grade, she started writing, a book. She started researching scholarships. Now, this is before the internet.
Right.
So you have to get that book. Long story short, in 4 years, she accumulated over $100,000 in scholarship money. Now, you're talking about the mid 90s. That's a lot of money, right, to the early 2000s. So now I told my wife, I said, listen, she wrote a book about it. I said, we're gonna do the same thing with our kids. So we started researching what they would like to do, started putting them academically. Secondly, athletics. I told them you got to learn life sports, but also a competitive sport.
Right.
So they all play golf, they all swim. I exposed them to tennis. And so they said, listen, we want to gravitate toward basketball. My oldest son toward golf, and then also the arts. We put them in exposure, Will. And bottom line is, my oldest son plays all three saxophones and piano. Our youngest son, he tried the arts as far as that goes. But what ended up happening,
But people want to know if you can get scholarships and grants from
yeah,
HBCU.
look, this is what I'm saying. So when I looked at it from that aspect, Will, I said, okay, so we're going to apply for academic scholarships catered toward African Americans. We're going to apply for art scholarships in music that are catered toward African Americans. We're going to apply for scholarships in athletics that are catered toward African Americans. So look, I'm going to tell you, he got accepted to Howard University.
Excellent.
Academic scholarship. He's also in competition to be selected that pays all of it, from room, board, tuition, books, everything. And then on top of that, there's other scholarships in the STEM area. He'll also be playing ball.
Good.
So my point is, we were able to do all that at an HBCU.
That's excellent. I mean, one of the things that my brother and I, Dr. Thomas LaVeist, who is also an HBCU alum, he went to University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and then went on to University of Michigan to get his master's and doctorate. So again, another case of HBCU being able to prepare you to perform anywhere. But he and I together had written a book a few years ago for the Tom Joyner Foundation. Tom Joyner, huge supporter of HBCUs. The book was Tom Joyner Presents How to Prepare for College. And in that book, even though it was written a few years ago, it's over 10 years old, but some of the basics in there are still very, very relevant. And one of the things we talked about was very much what you just said. You got to, as a student, if you do well in school, if you put yourself in a position where you have options, some school is going to see you as special. There will be grants and opportunities at HBCUs. There'll be at PWIs. But the most important thing is you got to put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of these scholarships, these grants. And that's what you want. Scholarships and grants are things you don't pay back. You don't have to pay back. Loans are things you got to pay back. So we talked about that in that book. And right now, with the emphasis that has come upon HBCUs because of the ascension of Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris being an HBCU grad, Howard University, It's brought a lot of attention, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement really deserves a lot of credit for bringing attention to the inequities that exist. And so there's a lot more attention that's going to HBCUs in terms of donations. We Lincoln received, a donation from for 20 million, among other schools in Norfolk State was among that came from the former one of the founders of Amazon, Mackenzie. What is Mackenzie's her last name? Mackenzie
McKinney.
Scott. Right. I didn't want to say Mackenzie Phillips. That I'm dating myself. But Mackenzie Scott, which we appreciate her and others who have done that
Absolutely.
kind of commitment. So the monies
Absolutely.
and the attention is there, but you got to put yourself in a position to be blessed. If you don't put yourself in a position to be seen as special, to be able to receive these grants or scholarships, it's not going to matter. So number 8, alumni
Yep.
associations for graduates of all HBCUs. Alumni associations for graduates of
Yep.
all HBCUs.
Well, I mean, all universities have alumni associations, so this is nothing germane to HBCUs. But you touched on it. You said we're getting a lot of attention from Kamala Harris becoming Vice President of the United States. We can't forget about Raphael Warnock, a Black preacher who went to Morehouse, who is the U.S. Senator representing the state of Georgia.
Right.
Okay. The state of Georgia. That is
First, that's huge. Yeah, that's huge.
first African American to represent the state of Georgia post Reconstruction in the U.S. Senate. I mean, so this alumni circle that we have are because we were limited as African Americans in every aspect and facet of life. We've had to work toward getting in these areas. So look, whether you go, if it weren't for HBCUs, we wouldn't have any Spike Lee. We wouldn't have Samuel Jackson. We wouldn't have Felicia Rashad. We wouldn't have Debbie Allen. We wouldn't have Reginald F. Lewis on Wall Street, who's the author of Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? We wouldn't have all of these successful African Americans in business,
Right.
in law, the Thurgood Marshalls, in law, in politics, in medicine, and the like, entertainment galore. So the network of HBCUs and our alumni network is important because these are people who have helped to unlock the doors, some that kick down the doors, and others who have come in and are blazing trails in those industries. So that's why HBCU alumni associations, just like HBCU alumni on Facebook, it's very important because this is where you get an opportunity to see what you can do as an African American in those industries.
And also the alumni associations as organizations are also a big part of the experience because of the way that you are encouraged to continue to be involved in your university and to give back. Those
Yep.
associations themselves become an avenue for you to do that. Like right now, I'm a lifetime member of my alumni association at Lincoln University. And I'm also, right now, as we speak, in the process of seeking a nomination to be on the board of trustees of Lincoln University as a nominee presented by the Alumni Association. And so, appreciate that. And so, in our communities, because you're encouraged to give back, to stay engaged, those alumni associations become ways for you to be able to stay involved and to do that. And one of the things that we've been stressing a lot, and that all HBCU alumni and family people connected need to do, is to really give back, to give back of your time, your talent, and absolutely your treasure. So no one can tell you what amount of money you should be giving, but you can look in your bank account and say, I know this university meant a lot to me. It was a significant part of my life story. So let me identify, let me budget, and let me give back so that other students can have that same type of experience. So if when you initially get out, if $50 is all that you can do, then do that. If 25 is all that you can do, then do that. If you can do more, absolutely you should do more. You should look into your account, look into what your capability is, and do that, and graduate and increase it as you're able to, because that blessing, that ability to pay it forward and to give back is going to pay dividends with the next generation and with our community.
Absolutely. One thing that we've been able to do through my law firm at my alma mater, the Law Center, we were able to give a donation to actually start and help a trial team that was starting up, and even more money to help build on the legacy there.
Right.
So again, like you said, I wasn't able to give 3.5 million or 350,000, but I was able to give what I was able to give, to give back, to say, hey, we want to continue this legacy, which brings us to number 7.
Number 7.
Continue the legacy.
Yes.
Will, I think one of the biggest, you mentioned it, there are 2 things we could do to really continue the legacy. Well, really 3, in my opinion. Number 1, you said it, give back, right? Whatever you can do, $20 a month, $25 a month. After you get your tax return, give $100, something.
Right.
But give.
Start and graduate on up. Don't stay at 25, 20 years after you graduate. Don't stay at 25 now. That's a problem. Go ahead.
Look, just like in church, they stayed at that $25 scholarship, going to school. It's like, look, things going up. But, again, increase. Secondly, continue the legacy by encouraging your children. That's the greatest compliment that our schools can receive, is that our children say, we want to go to your alma mater, or we want to build on the legacy of other HBCUs, to continue that legacy. And to me, that's the biggest. And third, we continue to advocate for HBCUs, you and I, others.
Absolutely.
And if you work in the industry, and you see other groups that are coming in internship programs, say, hey, have you considered the HBCU in your community? Have you considered this? Consider that? Because a lot of people don't know about the great aspects of HBCUs. And some African Americans outside of the South or the Northeast and in the Midwest, and some individuals who are non-Black, whites and Hispanics and the like, they don't know. So it gives us a chance to tell the story.
So number 6, empowerment. That one is very powerful for me, because when I initially came to Lincoln, I wasn't sure of what industry I was going to go in, what I was going to study. I didn't declare as a major, but I got empowered and discovered my calling as a journalist at Lincoln because of a professor, Dr. Joanne Gavin, now at James Madison University there in Virginia. She looked at me one time in class. We're taking a class, which is a news writing class, which actually was the class that put together the student newspaper, the Lincolnian. Mm-hmm. So she looks at me one day in class, because I'm looking at her and I'm like, Dr. Gavin is fine. Here, I'm a 19-year-old student. I'm looking up at her. She looked at me, shook her head, and said, you know what? I'm going to make you the editor of the paper. And I said, whatever you say. Whatever you say, Dr. Gavin. You don't find Dr. Gavin. Well, it was after that, and after I got into actually developing the paper, writing editorials, and I saw the impact that my writing had on other students, that's what actually hooked me on journalism. So here you had that moment where someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. They empowered me to what ended up being a 20 plus year journalism career. I ended up coming down there to Virginia to be the first Black Metro columnist at the Hampton Roads Daily Press, the paper across the water from you. So that just shows you how an experience like that at an HBCU, professor who cares about you, sees your potential, can empower you to go on and do great things.
Well, I would look at it from a different perspective, because empowerment just comes from being in a community of African Americans, people that look like you, that are aspiring to learn just like you, that are pushing you to do great things, and you're pushing them. Right. You know what I'm saying? So to me, that's the empowerment. And the fact that in communities, HBCUs are not just economic drivers, but they're centers of expression of power and real power for the Black community. If you look at, and more specifically, HBCU law schools, I'm an advocate for creating more HBCU law schools and medical schools, because we see the power when you have these entities in your community, the power that you have. There are several stories out about NCCU, who has a law school there, Texas Southern in Houston, how you have graduates from these universities that become judges, right? You're not going to see that where you have 5, 8, 10 Black judges from the same law school elected to the bench. Southern University, classmates, my former students, as I taught at the Law Center, adjunct professor of law there, some of my former students are now sitting on the bench. Right. I had 5 classmates and former students just sworn in last year. That is tremendous. Which kind of brings us to the next point of diversity.
Absolutely.
we touched on it before, Will, and you know, the black community is not monolithic.
Not at
We're
all. Not at all.
and I hate when they put us in that category like that. Saying, "Oh, you're all just alike," but no, we're different. That doesn't mean that we are different and we oppose each other, but we're different, approaching issues from a different perspective. And that's one thing that helped me to learn at HBCUs and my HBCU and teach here is that that's how you learn to grow,
Right.
and that's how you learn to evolve.
Right. So not only different perspectives and ideologies, we're different. We have great diversity within us culturally. Like, for example, I'm also half Hispanic. I'm half Latino. My mother was Afro Latino from the Dominican Republic. My father was born as African American, born here, raised in the Caribbean. So I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, one of the most diverse places where you got all kinds of flavor going on within
Oh
the
yeah,
African diaspora, right? But guess what? I go down to Lincoln and I hear for the first time not commercial uh, go-go music, from Chuck Brown, the godfather of go-go, the father of go-go. I heard Bustin' Loose. I feel like Bustin' Loose when I was in New York, and it was like, okay, that's go-go. No, fella, you, when I got down to Lincoln, I heard real Chuck Brown and
right,
all of the other go-go. And I'm like, yeah, so I heard for the first time, for example, and I'm just talking about diversity in terms of music. I heard for the first time Too Short. Too Short is a legendary rapper in Oakland. I heard for the first time too. Now here I am from Brooklyn, where we think everything ends in terms of rap music in Brooklyn, and even though it began in the Bronx, we still taking it out of in Brooklyn, saying we run.
right,
And then I heard Too Short for the first time. So you get in this variety where you have these students coming from all over the African diaspora. Then I had students where I'm chopping it up in a room from Africa, from South Africa, that's telling us about the struggle there, other fellow students from the Caribbean. So you get this diversity you see within our own people, within our own culture, yet you see how we are so closely connected. And I spoke about my mother. My mother was a Pan-Africanist, and she always taught about how all of the peoples whose ancestors made it through that transatlantic slave trade and who made it to the Americas, and that we were all interrelated, that we were all cousins, we all have the same bloodline. I learned at Lincoln that there was more black people down in South America than in North America. There's more black people in Brazil than it is in the United States. So
that's right.
we have this wealth of diversity within our people. So when it always boggles my mind when people say, don't go to an HBCU because there's no diversity, it's not the real world. You only hear that from people that don't know anything about HBCUs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then look, we're not even going to talk about HBCUs not preparing for the real world because this political season, we just saw this, and not just the political season, but we also saw researchers, persons who were involved in research, medical research, and so forth, at the forefront. People in the legal environment, charging and leading in social justice and reform. I mean, look, so that argument is out the window, right? But
Absolutely.
that it also shows the fear of people saying, "Wait a minute, is this what HBCUs are producing?" There may be a threat here to status quo, but it goes also to number four. We talk about a supportive atmosphere.
Hmm.
HBCUs, like I said before, is where Black Lives Matter, Black intellect matters, Black hair matters, Black music matters. Talk about music, a lot of people like I heard the Chi-Town, house music. I was like, man, what is this? But you kind of grew to it a little bit, right? It kind of grows on you. But then people from Chicago came down and heard about the New Orleans music, the
That's right.
bounce,
That's right.
Master P, and then people from Atlanta brought in the Outcasts and the groups that were coming out of there. With LaVeist Records and others who were rapping and so forth. And then people out of Florida, and came out of Florida, South Miami,
Luke.
95 South, and all those guys, man. And then, of course, from California, they're bringing in all different types of music that we haven't heard,
Hmm.
but came from the South, right? We all came from the South. We spread and we created this phenomenal music, and the atmosphere was supportive to that, where you could have it. Man, look, you can have a Gumby haircut, a fade next semester, You can have it slick back, slick down. You can have it froed out, blowed out, twisted, and then nobody bat an eye.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that brings us down to number three: classes, I can't speak, extracurricular activities tailored to African Americans. And I can tell you, on the campus, the HBCU campus, especially one is as old as mine. For example, the Greek fraternity and sorority life is a huge part of the whole campus experience. And so I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, and Mu chapter is one of the oldest chapters in the fraternity. So having
Absolutely.
gone through in the 80s, you already know that the style of pledging and what I experienced, you already know that it was old school.
It's quite different. It's quite
So,
different.
but the thing about the organization is that they maintain that emphasis on still doing positive work in the community. And unlike a lot of the white fraternities and sororities, it extends after you graduate. So it becomes a network. It's not just, for most people, not just something that you did when you were in college, but it's something that continues on, and you continue to be able to use those as avenues to get back into engaging your university as well as engaging the community. Because all of those organizations were very much founded with the principles of uplifting the Black community, doing something
Absolutely.
positive, empowering these newly educated African Americans coming out of generations of slavery and coming into education, being an important pathway for upliftment. All of these organizations had this emphasis on empowering, doing something positive for the community. So those kinds of organizations and opportunities
Yeah.
I mentioned, already being made the editor of the newspaper, and how that changed my life. So in these environments, HBCUs, especially the Greek life, again, not just something that you do in college, but something that continues on throughout the rest of your life.
Absolutely, and not just that, but coming just not just from Greek life, but also, like you said, the newspaper, the SGA,
Right.
uh, the Student Government Association, and they at the law school, the Student Bar Association. All of these were geared toward African Americans and African Americans for leadership purposes. Still writing the same quality, as others, but again, you take the leadership part, and we see individuals who are in the industries now having leadership there. Which brings us to number two, caring professors and faculty. Now, let me say this. For me, this really hits home because both at law school and undergrad, there were two people that really took me under their wing, and without them, I wouldn't be who I am today. I want to give a shout out to my good friend, mentor, and just a phenomenal human being, John Pierre, who is the chancellor of Southern University Law Center, one of my former professors. And, you know, as a professor, we just kind of connected, right?
Mm.
And from there, to this day, we talk almost every day, every single day. Now, this gentleman here advises people from Washington all the way across to the West Coast. He's the person that everybody calls when they need some advice and things of that nature. Knows everybody, smart as a whip, just brilliant within his own right. And again, just took me under his wing. And any opportunity that's out there, he exposes it to us. So for him, I wouldn't be an attorney today if it wasn't for him. In undergrad is Dr. Leva Saradine.
Mm.
Dr. Saradine became my college mother. When I was slipping in my grades, she pulled me to the side and she laid me out, and she looked like my mother. I'm telling you, she laid me out, brother. And Dr. Saradine was actually Lebanese, and she was over here
Yeah.
on asylum because she fought in the Civil War in the 80s back in Lebanon. She's passed away now, but when you said, the caring professors, she pushed me to learn about international relations. I created a Model UN organization at the school. We learned about South Africa. We learned about Sao Tome and Principe. We learned about other nations and learned about international diplomacy. We were able to go to New York. I was able to visit the UN. I was able to spend 3 days
It showed
there.
you how everything tied together, how these are not just separate abstract things, but they all ties together. Liberation is worldwide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But Will, like I said, man, and I had to take a couple of minutes to talk about those two people. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here at all.
Right. Absolutely. And I mentioned Dr. Joanne Gabin for me, also Dr. Willis in the English department, the late Clarence Kinney was a fraternity brother. He was administrator on campus, always took care of us. But let me ask, Is it still like that? You're on Norfolk State's campus now. Is it still like that? Or the current students experiencing that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was on I was on a virtual panel with one of our state delegates who was just elected from Norfolk State University, representing the second district here, state district in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and she talked about the professors that were here that helped to mold and shape her. She had other
Right.
classmates on there that talked about that, and they had a current student from Virginia State University that talked about their professor. And listen, for me, I'm known as an internship guy and an opportunity guy. I've placed over 120. I graduated 125 students
Right.
out of a law program that we created, placed them in law schools, 80 law school acceptances across the country, $5.5 million in scholarships, and it's because again, I care for those students. I care for them, still do, and still do for my students today. So yeah, it exists.
That's excellent. Which brings us down to the final one. Number one, a first rate education. I was doing
Absolutely.
some research, in preparing for um, a candidates forum that I had with uh, other candidates for the Lincoln Board of Trustees. And one of the things, just browsing and looking, I looked up Lincoln's first black president, which I knew was Horace Mann Bond, Julian Bond's father, right? But the thing that I wasn't as much aware of Horace Mann Bond as part of his story was that he was alum of Lincoln. I knew that. But then he went on to the University of Chicago where he got his master's and his doctorate. And in that experience, he says about how when he got to the University of Chicago, he realized that he was prepared to compete with any student on the planet. So he graduated, he came out of the University of Chicago with the highest honors as one of the top students. I mentioned earlier myself having come out of Lincoln University and then going to the University of Arizona, Graduate School of Journalism, getting my doctorate from ODU. When I was at the University of Arizona, I had no reservations at all about my ability to compete. I mentioned my brother, Dr. Thomas LaVeist, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, HBCU, went to the University of Michigan for his master's and his doctorate. He's one of the top sociologists in the nation. He's now the dean of the School of Public Health at Tulane. When he tells that story about when he got to University of Michigan, he knew he was ready to compete. All of us, anybody who says these institutions are not top rate institutions that prepare you to compete anywhere is absolutely another person who knows nothing about HBCUs. Because all I did was just tell your story, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, that argument goes out the door. I would not be who I am today unless I attended in a Southern University and Southern University Law School. I wouldn't be. I love teaching HBCUs as well. I love being a professor at HBCUs. I love the radio show that I do here at HBCU here at Norfolk State on WNSB. I love every aspect of HBCU. I love that my son chose. My son applied to several of the Ivy League schools, several of the top private tier schools. He applied to one of the plus two Ivy League schools, and of course he applied to his top HBCU, which was Howard University. And when we took him on campus, took him on campus twice. I said, son, where do you want to go? He said, Howard and nowhere else. I said, you're not going to wait for the decision from, Princeton. You're not going to wait for a decision from MIT or the other schools. He said, no, Howard is where I'm going. So it's that type of education, that type of exposure that I believe that, again, we pass on to the next generation and the legacy continues to go for our great schools. I love my HBCUs and support them. Well, look, Will, this was a fun segment. Thoroughly enjoyed it. All of you that are out there, continue to follow us. Thank you for your support. Continue to follow us on our social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever it is, YouTube. Follow us there. And until then, be well.